7. Kindness. I woke with my face pressed against the moldy pillow. The bit of straw I'd pushed together to try and make a bed had left marks all over my skin. It was too much more. It was much more uncomfortable than sleeping against the soft fur of my four-legged family. My heart sank as I remembered where I was. I was hungry and thirsty, and wondered if Baldy would soon tempt me with more food. I listened out for him, but there didn't seem to be any noise within the building. Outside, I could hear the new familiar thunking. I stared up at the cell window. If I could get up there, I could hang onto the bars and look out. I backed up as far as I could, and with a good running start, I leapt up at the window. By bracing against the wall with my legs and holding onto the bars with my hands, I could see outside. I could see the entire mountainside quarry. There were many large chunks gouted from the cliff's face. How long, I wondered, had the kids been working there? There must have been around 50 of them, all having hammers, lunging rocks, and pushing wheelbarrows. Below my window was a pile of rocks. I saw Rufus at once, filling up a wheelbarrow. He was a skinny kid and was working really hard just to lift the rocks. Once his wheelbarrow was full, he wheeled it away across the field towards the outer wall. There, a couple of soldiers were standing on either side of another gate. They inspected Rufus and his wheelbarrow, then opened the gate and let him through. So there was more than one way out of this place. I kept watching, hoping for more information. I was light and strong, but soon my hands got sore from hanging onto the bars. I ignored the pain. Soon Rufus returned through the same gate with an empty wheelbarrow. Where had he taken the rocks? Rufus made his way back over the field towards the pile below my window. Would he go back and forth all day? His eyes flickered upwards, and he caught me staring at him. I felt suddenly explode and let go of the bars. I landed lightly on the floor of my cell, trying not to panic. Would he tell the soldiers he had spied me looking out? I heard a quiet thump on the outside wall. What was that? It was enough for Rufus to tease me. Now he was throwing things at my cell. There was another thump. Then, a moment later, something flew through the windows. I stared, disbelieving. It was a hunk of bread. Without thinking, I bit into it. It was hard and stale, but I didn't care. I was starving and it tasted amazing. I chewed and chewed until it was gone, then looked up at the window. I sprung up again and grabbed the bars. Rufus was still below, piling more rocks into his wheelbarrow, but desperately being slow about it. When I appeared in the window, he smiled up at me. "Thank you," I said. Rufus smiled, winking with amazement. I'd forgotten that I wasn't supposed to be talking to anyone. "So you can speak," he loud whispered at me. "Yes," I said. "Would you like some more food?" "Yes," I said. He took another piece of bread out of his pocket and broke it in half. "Hey," someone shouted. Rufus spun to see a soldier sprinting towards him. The man grabbed Rufus roughly around his neck, snatched the bread from his hand, and looked up at my window. I quickly let go of the bars and dropped down onto the cell floor. I could hear the soldiers outside. "So, you're not hungry, huh? You have got so much food you can just give it away." I heard scoffing and then a thud as Rufus whimpered. "Look, let's go see what Farron thinks of this," said the soldier. For the rest of the day, I wondered what had happened to Rufus. I climbed up to the window and looked out, but I couldn't see him. I couldn't see the soldier who had taken him away either. Finally, as evening fell, footsteps sounded from down the corridor. The soldier appeared, along with Baldy, pushing Rufus along. "Hey, open the cell opposite mine," and shoved him into it. You have a good think about the rules," said the soldier. "Maybe next time you will mind your own business." Rupert started to cry, and the soldiers turned to me. "As for you, Wolf Girl, I hope you enjoy your crumbs. You won't be getting any more." The soldier walked off. Baldy took a moment to sneer at me and Rufus before walking away too. I pattered over to my cell door and peered into Rupert's cell. He was sniffling on the floor. "I'm sorry you got in trouble for helping me," I said. Rufus whimpered his nose, wiped his nose, and turned to hide his tears. Tried to hide his tears. "Where were you all day?" "In Farron's office. She was out of the camp for some reason, so they just left me there, tied to a seat." "Don't worry," I said. "We are going to get out of here." I tried to sound more certain than I was. "How?" "It was a good question. I'm thinking about it," I said. I thought about it for a while, long enough to hear the sound of Baldy's snores drifting down the corridor. It was also long enough for Rufus to stop sniffling and start asking questions. "Say," he said, "since you aren't as wild as you look, why were you howling before?" Should I tell him the truth? Should I tell him about Sunrise, about Nosy, about how I'd spent the last 4 years living with a wolf and dogs? How we'd hunted, ate, played, and slept as a pack? How I hadn't seen a single human until the men found the truck grabbed me and brought me here. I was calling to my family, I said. 8. Another way in. The dogs ran under the light of a full moon, the hair on the road shining to them like beacons of hope. Every time the road split, Nosy looked for another strand, and every time he found one, Tiny struggled the most, as he had to work 3 times as hard to keep up, and it was all straining to get a bit much, or starting to get a bit much. He huffled and panted along, but after a while he began to fall behind. Sunrise lowered herself down before the little chihuahua. Tiny, she gasped with her head, get in the backpack. Thanks, Tiny yelped. He collapsed gratefully in the pack, and they started off again. They followed the road until even Sunrise was starting to worry. Suddenly, they turned a bend and saw a break in the trees. There were light shining through. I smell 2 legs, barked Nosy. Into the trees, said Sunrise. We must not be seen. They ran off the road into the forest, their tiredness forgotten. Soon they reached the tree line bordering their camp, and peered out at the wall. Up on top of it, figures were moving about. This is where Gwen's trail leads, said Nosy. We cannot jump that wall, said Bruce. Maybe there's another way in, said Nosy, staying hidden within the tree line. The dogs prowled around the entire camp. As they neared the cliffs on one side, they came to a place where the forest was closer to the wall. Things seemed quiet on the other side, and there was no more moving about above. Look there, said Tiny, from his high vintage, pointing his snout towards the wall. The earth looked loose. Could we dig our way in? Said Nosy. Perhaps, said Sunrise, but we must be quiet. They slung from the trees and slipped into the shadows of the wall. Zip dug a paw into the ground and released it up. Dirt fell from his claws. It's soft, he said. Excited, he started to dig and sent dirt spraying into everyone's eyes. Zip, said Sunrise. Move aside and make room. She nodded to Bruce and they positioned themselves beside Zip. Together they began to dig a hole under the wall. Finally, there was a space under the wall, big enough for even Sunrise to fit through. She went down on her belly and crawled her way under. One by one, the others followed. They emerged behind a shed. Sunrise looked around the corner and saw a field covered in rocks. How do we know where to go? Said Bruce. Noisy, said Sunrise. Noisy sniffed around for a bit but cannot find Gwen's scent. She has to be somewhere in this place, said Sunrise. We just have to look. Sunrise kept low to the ground as she led them out into the field. In the distance, torch flashed about as a patrol of two legs made their way around the quarry. Don't let them see us, said Sunrise. Hide behind that thing, said Tiny, running towards a dark shape ahead. The others followed, running quietly into the shadows of a tent. The patrol turned in another direction, and for a moment the dogs were relieved. Then, from inside the tent, came the sound of voices. Sunrise tensed her eyes, sh- shining, shishing. But the two legs in the tent were only laughing. A smell wafted through the air that made every dog's mouth water. It was meat being cooked. Food, suggested Bruce. It was too dangerous, said Sunrise. I'm hungry, says Bruce. The two legs must not see us, said Sunrise firmly. Gwen fed us. We kept looking. We ate when we find Gwen. They moved on, trying to ignore the exciting smell. So they found themselves among a pile of rocks alongside a big, long building. Such a big place, snarled Bruce. How can we wing bait, flinting the fur off their face? And they spun towards the gust with teeth breathe. Just then Eagle landed on a rock pile before them. Eagle, said Sunrise. Eagle, said others. We thought we'd lost you, said Tiny. Eagle nodded her head at him, as if to say, It's good to see you too, little guy. Do you know where Gwen is? Said Noisy. Eagle gave a long croak and turned to look at the building beside them. Then she took off, landing on the roof above a window. Does she mean Gwen is in there? Said Sunrise.